Hello and welcome to Krakow. For those of you from Krakow, thank you for welcoming us to your, beautiful city. Here is actually a photograph from the last time I was in Krakow when the temperature was like minus 20 degrees Celsius. So, we've been really happy to see some sunshine in Krakow. Anyway, my name is Sam Dutton. I'm a developer advocate for the web. I work for Google, based in London. I'm here today and tomorrow with a bunch of other Googlers people working on Chrome and some really brilliant web developers. So please, if you have questions, come and chat to us in the web area. Come and check out Lighthouse and all the other stuff that we've got. I wanted to cover some of the stuff from the keynote in a little more detail and really give an overview of the web today. I want to give a high-level overview, but also some of the business reasons why I think it makes sense to build progressive web apps. So we're going to go into that now, and there will be sessions later with more technical detail about building for the web. So, like you heard earlier, in a word, the web is big. There are now over 5 billion devices out there that can access web content. This is incredible, I think. You get this instant broad reach with the web. And this didn't happen, because of luck. Yeah, the web is this open, decentralized platform. There are no gatekeepers. Websites get massive reach and users get, low friction, which is great. And I think, we've all seen charts like this. Mobile computing is at the heart of this revolution. There's been this explosion of computing on mobile. And, we now use more mobile devices than desktop computers and so on. And this is a really interesting challenge for developers. We've also reached this point now, particularly noticed this in some regions, where a lot of users coming online are actually, mobile only. They never use a desktop or a laptop device. And again, this is a really interesting challenge for the web. Of course, on mobile, most users spend most of their time in native apps, rather than the web. Apps are seen to be more, predictable. They have great re-engagement features. All this good stuff in native apps. You think, I could cut my presentation short right now and say, go and build native. We could all go home. There is a flip side to this, though, and I'm sure you understand this, particularly app developers in the audience here. App usage is highly concentrated. Users tend to only use a few apps. They see native apps as a big commitment to device space and time and cost. Native apps are engaging, but only a few are worth installing. Now, based on a recent study, something like the average user is installing 0 apps per month. This certainly does not mean that users are not using native apps, but by contrast, from our own data, something like the average mobile user visits around 100 sites per month. This is the power of URLs and the ephemerality of the web, particularly to meet one-off needs. I think one way to think of the difference between native and web apps is on the capability access. Native apps start up quickly and reliably when you tap their icon. They tend to work offline. So, who here, when do you ever open a web browser when you know you're offline? That's just not what people do. Native apps can use push notifications, sync in the background, and so on. And they've had, access for some time to device sensors like microphones, cameras, and so on. By contrast, the web has been seen to be, safer, more respectful of privacy maybe, but it hasn't had those capabilities. I think, what if we could add those capabilities so the web could get that engagement and meet those UX expectations? We could have the best of both worlds. And, this is what progressive web apps represent. A user experience that's good enough, integrated enough, so it can actually earn a place on the home screen. And the notification tray without having to give up that reach to get that. This is really the core point. Progressive web apps is really just a term for, like radically improving the quality of the end-to-end user experience. We want to learn from native apps. We want to take what's best from native apps and bring that to the web. And this requires being really honest about what matters to users. So in order to do that, I think we need to focus on 4 things. We need to make the web fast. We need to make web experiences better integrated with device, hardware platforms and other apps. And we need to make sure that web experiences are reliable, and we need to keep users engaged. So I want to look at each of those properties in a little more detail. Now, from a really good native app, users do not expect janky scrolling or slow load performance. And, the web has had a bad name for slow performance, I think, particularly on mobile. And by performance, I mean like in-page, performance like scrolling and so on, as well as load performance. And in a sense, an app has to be kind of invisible. Users should not be aware that they're actually loading an app. It should just work. And we want to see that on the web. And this isn't just a kind of abstract goal. We all know that time is money on the web. This data from SOATSA, shows just how much that is true. After only like a little more than 3 seconds, something like 20% of your users will abandon the experience. And there's evidence that users are getting shorter attention spans, that this is getting tighter every year. So a couple of other numbers. It takes the average web page on mobile 19 seconds to load on a 3G connection. That's really bad for everyone. For every 1 second delay in page loads, we calculate that sites lose something like 7% of conversions. That's really bad for business. We really need to fix this. And one of the side effects, thinking about this on the web, of the reach of the web, is that you do not have control where users start in your experience, like which page they hit first on your site. You can't dictate like you can with a native app where users start. So we've been working to make sure that wherever someone starts, they start fast. Pages need to be reliable and fast from the first time that users load them. And to fix this, last year we started working on a project, Accelerated Mobile Pages, known as AMP. This is an open source project to create super fast web pages. We all know that accessing pages on the mobile web can be painful, and AMP is a framework to ensure that content loads reliably. We've been able to prove this over the last year. AMP pages load on average in less than a second. On average, they use like 10% less data than compared to non-AMP pages. This is particularly important for users, where data is expensive, where people are really constrained by their use of data. A good example of this, doing great work actually, the Weather Channel. They've seen like a 4 times increase in click-through rates. It's fantastic on their AMP articles and into their main site. That's up from something like 21 to like 90% click-through rates, which is great since launching the beginning of this year. So, instant access to information is really valuable, like, this example of these giant hailstones, Weather.com, they get that, and I think, AMP is really paying off for them. Now, AMP was originally focused on publishers and static content. The format has been constantly evolving to support, really critical new features and verticals like e-commerce. Merchants can now use AMP to build really interactive and engaging pages. And a lot of e-commerce partners have really started to do that. Last summer, eBay launched all their product listing pages on AMP. Over 15 million pages, reliably load in less than a second. And now they're launching product pages worldwide on AMP. And that means that users can go from searching on Google to actually buying something on eBay in like milliseconds. So in total for AMP, since launch, there have been over 2 billion AMP pages, 900,000 domains, and every second, 58 AMP pages released into the wild. That's incredible. If you want to learn more about AMP, check out Ben Morse's presentation after lunch today. We have an AMP training session tomorrow afternoon as well. And you'll find out like AMP and progressive web apps, they work really well. The two attitudes to building for the web work really well together. To build sites that, as the slogan goes, to start fast and stay fast. So, as well as speed, users expect this app-like integration with their device hardware, the operating system, and other apps. You know that feeling when you use a really great native app, you get that tight connection right from the start. You can focus on what you want to achieve, and you kind of forget that you're using an app. I think that users shouldn't have to feel like they're reaching through a browser tab in order to access your app. In fact, the user shouldn't have to think about the fact they're on the web. They're just using their phone or their tablet or desktop to complete whatever is their task. So just one example of this is like dear to my heart because I've worked on this stuff is media. In the past, it's been really difficult to get media working well on the web. And people have felt like they had to consume media in an app. This just isn't the case anymore. We worked really hard across platforms to make media more effective and also just to ensure that video, audio content can be included in the page and it just works. We've got great new APIs to build robust, secure, efficient media experiences that can even work offline. This is a particularly important problem to solve. Over 70% of internet traffic now is actually video. That number's increasing. It's incredible. All the browsers need to ensure that we can get this, really complete solution across different browsers for the mobile web for media. So we have these new APIs that are improving capability for media on the web. I would really recommend checking out, this is Paul Lewis's fantastic progressive web app for media publishing. It's at bit.ly/PWA media. And it gives you adaptive streaming, pre-caching for faster loads. Orientation change gives you instant full screen. You get custom controls, thumbnails, and so on. And for me, this is amazing. This is amazing to see this happening on the web. It's a beautiful app. I really recommend that. So the technology is opening up the web to even more platforms, even more experiences. With the Web VR API, we get this incredible expressive power on the web. This is enabling companies, like Within, to bring this really incredible experiences from VR creators from around the world, directly to the browser. Companies like Sketchfab bringing these amazing VR scenes. I believe they have 1.5 million of these that you can explore. This would look really wonderful if everyone here had a VR headset. Would also look a bit weird, I guess. But anyway, you get a sense of what is possible. And looking forward to the advent of augmented reality, this idea of connecting information, data with the physical world. We think the web is going to play a pivotal role there as well. Thinking about integration, I just wanted to touch on new capabilities also for e-commerce. Mobile commerce is a huge deal. Last year, mobile commerce was worth, just in the US, was worth something like $123 billion. You can imagine what the figure is for Europe. This is actually a fundamental challenge for the web. So the web has gone mobile, but conversions are, we calculate, something like 1/3 lower on mobile than desktop. And this makes sense. It's hard to enter data on a phone. And we need better integration, because e-commerce is really all about removing friction. So browsers have worked to, improve this with Autofill, and that's great. Today on Chrome, we have something like 9 billion forms and passwords which are auto-filled each month. This is good, but it's not enough. The payment request API goes a step further than this. This is a W3C standard for browsers to present a standardized interface for users to enter payment and shipping data. So the users get a consistent, secure experience, and developers don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. And this works from a tiny boutique right up to some e-commerce giant. Sites can call the payment request API, like in the screencast here. the browser, then securely can store email, shipping, credit card data on file for the user. So the browser can provide a merchant with all this in one form, pre-populated, again, to reduce friction. So you can see that the web has become this, highly capable platform. It's tightly integrated with underlying operating system, hardware capabilities. Users need better reliability as well. At present, users have not come to expect the web to work without a network connection, yeah? And most of us don't even bother to try when connectivity is slow or intermittent. We really need to change that perception. Web apps must be reliable. When a user taps on a home screen icon, they expect it to load instantly and reliably. Launched from the home screen, apps should never, ever show the dinosaur. Thinking back to the 90s, when the web was growing up, does anyone know what this actually is? Maybe not. Maybe a few people. For those who've never seen it, this was how we got online, probably from some monolithic desktop machine somewhere in the house in the basement or something, with this modem. You had to put the whole house into online mode. I remember back in the day, 56K to me would have been really exciting because, we'd grown up on 14K. And, what you have to do is yell to the whole house, don't pick up the phone, or that would kill the connection, in the middle of a download or whatever. And of course, in those days, we knew that we were online because nothing else was happening. Now, we think of the internet and connectivity kind of more like a utility, like gas or electricity, almost like oxygen, Users are coming to expect connectivity to be available all the time. And, we've become used to this. And this means that, seeing this dinosaur is just not an option. You imagine if you went to a native app and you got some kind of system-generated error message, when the device was offline. You just think, what? This is crazy. But we've become used to this on the web. We have to deal with this. We have to solve this. The other problem is that, as we know, mobile phones, they're not just online or offline. It's not a binary state. They exist in this kind of Schrodinger's cat state. Is it on? Is it off? We get these problems with cell connectivity, you've got 4 bars here, but it turns out you do not have a working connection. So it's not just no connection that breaks our experience, it's slow or intermittent connections that can really be worse for users. And like I say, mobile apps should, much as I love the cute little dinosaur, they should never show him. No other app, will show this. And so, in order for web apps to really earn their place on the home screen, we need to make them reliable even when the network is not reliable. And this is where service workers come in. I just wanted to ask, who has heard of service workers and feels like they have a pretty good idea of why they're game-changing for the web? Oh, that's great, actually. Hooray. That's really good to see. For those of you who don't know about service worker, the traditional web model has been you type in a URL or you click on a link or a bookmark or whatever, and the browser goes to the network, looks up the web server, and retrieves the resources required for a page. Now, the browser, of course, has an HTTP cache, but, if the network is down, you get a visit from our friend the dinosaur. And the user experience, obviously, can be even worse with flaky connectivity. So, a service worker is a client-side proxy, acts as an intermediary between your app and the outside world. You write a service worker in JavaScript in a separate file, kind of like a web worker. And after the first visit, the service worker is installed. And after that, it can intercept, respond to events like network requests. And the service worker then can use the cache API to cache resources and work with storage features like IndexedDB for data and so on. And that enables you, the developer, the site owner, to decide when to use the cache and when to go to the network. This is extremely powerful. Like I said, service workers are acting like a proxy between your app and the outside world. Now, this means that they can also handle incoming events as well as outgoing requests. Push notifications are a great example of this. Push messages are received via, by the operating system via whatever push service it uses, and then passed on to the browser. The push event from the browser then wakes up the relevant service worker that subscribed to it, and then that can call a push handler. The really nice thing is here that the browser does not even need to be open. This is fantastic for reducing usage of, memory, CPU, battery, and so on. I think, this kind of, capability for engagement, re-engagement is where progressive web apps are really coming alive. So, of course, a truly engaging app needs to kind of go beyond being, just functional and reliable and ensure that, the whole experience is delightful and it makes it easier, for the user to do what they need to do. Really good experiences on the web. They need to have the right capabilities, use them at the right time in a beautiful way. Twitter is a great example of this. They launched a progressive web app in spring this year. They'd noticed their web traffic was growing, and yet the experience wasn't great. So they set out to redesign their mobile web experiences at PWA. And this is a great place to look to see what can be done on the web. They had 3 goals in mind. They needed to cope with slow or flaky networks, and they had to consume less data. This is critically important for a global service for all their users. And, Twitter needs to work well for a huge variety of smartphones, from high-end to low-end, some of which have tiny levels of storage and limited CPU and so on. For those of you who've got a phone in your hand, you can check this out right now, mobile.twitter.com. You'll see how fast and smooth the scrolling is. Performance is a huge priority for Twitter. They can, access photos and videos for upload. You can see a tweet going on here. And of course, the web can now send push notifications. On Android, these appear alongside native web app notifications. And this is a fantastic re-engagement tool. I believe Twitter are now sending out something like 10 million push notifications per day, which is incredible. What I really love, though, is that Twitter can deliver this experience at a fraction of the size compared to native. You can see here the difference that a progressive web app can make. So how can a PWA be so small? Well, when you download an app, you download everything that the app needs, which is why you get those data sizes. But the PWA can leverage the resources of the browser and then, progressively install more assets and data as required. And again, this is a huge deal for, we need to remember that, for a lot of users in many regions, their constraint is actually from data cost as well as connectivity. You need to remember that and bear that in mind. So, as you might expect, Twitter is getting great metrics for their PWA compared to their previous mobile experience. And they're getting something like 1 million daily visits, users coming from the home screen icon, which is great. I've seen the same from a company called Ola. This is India's largest ride-hailing service. It's interesting that their mission was to build mobility for 1 billion Indians. It's an incredible scale. They started just 6 years ago. The co-founders, they would actually drive customers if a cab didn't show up. And now they're up to 1 million rides a day, something like that. But that was not enough when their target was billions of users. What they needed to do was to target Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. These are smaller cities, 20 to maybe 100K in size. A lot of users in those cities get flaky connectivity and are using cheaper smartphones. And it makes sense for those people not to actually install apps because of limited storage and the cost of data. So with Ola, their progressive web app, you get smooth navigation, which is great. You get this fantastic, robust UX and great functionality even on low bandwidth. So since launch, what they've seen is that things are going well for them in the Tier 2 cities, but what's really nice is that they're seeing great conversions up in the Tier 3 cities, up 30%. This is a fundamental point that progressive web apps are allowing them to address new audiences, new market. One stat I really like from them actually is that like 20% of their progressive web app bookings are actually from users who had previously uninstalled the app. This is fantastic. It's worth remembering that a lot of users, because of device memory constraints, whatever, are regularly uninstalling apps, and you don't get that on the web. If you want to find out more about what Ola and Twitter have done, check out their case studies on web fundamentals. I'll be sharing a link with that at the end of the presentation. Just briefly getting back to the topic of engagement, when a user visits your site, you can now prompt them to add the site to their home screen. Great example of doing this really well is Trivago, this travel site. They have progressive web app for something like 55 domains globally, incredible. And as you can see, the add to home screen process here works really, really well. And then it's, this app is now tightly integrated with the Android device. It's displayed in the app launcher, just like other apps, and it's part of Android settings, which is great. Now, but given this focus on Android, you might be wondering, well, is this progressive web app thing, is this a Google thing? And the answer is no. A big part of what makes progressive web apps so successful is that multiple browsers are committed to them. Developer adoption is obviously growing, but so is browser support. Opera, Samsung, Microsoft, Mozilla are on board with the features I've discussed. And of course, you might have also heard that, service workers are in development for Safari, which is great. But progressive web apps are really about the attitude to building web experiences that work well for all your users, so you can count on reaching users that are important to you. The word progressive is, it's in progressive web apps. It's not there by accident. We need to focus on this end-to-end user experience, and that can give a really dramatic impact to your business. Even with users, who can't experience the full power of progressive web apps because they're using a device that does not support some particular feature. A great example of this, the luxury cosmetics brand like Lancome. They built this great PWA, yeah? But I want to call this out because something like 65% of their users are actually on iOS. What they found was that when they built their progressive web app and used the kind of techniques that we're advocating and you can learn more about today, that they were getting much higher engagement. And this is fantastic. It just means that this is a good investment for you no matter what the browser mix is that you're targeting. Gartner's recently published a report advocating that PWAs should be part of a mobile development strategy. And, this idea that progressive web apps will begin to replace general purpose apps. So I know this sounds great, but I also know that reality sinks in. You go back to your day job and you think about building a progressive web app, and it could seem like this huge undertaking. But implementing these techniques need not be this monolithic refactoring task. I want to talk about some ways to get started. First and foremost, you need security. Yeah? HTTPS is table stakes for progressive web apps to keep your users and your business safe. This is not just for sites that work with sensitive data. Any site can be a target that's vulnerable for attack. And the green lock, indicates that that site is secure, is a secure connection between your users and your site. And this means three things. The user must be able to trust that the site is actually you, not a scammer or a phisher. They must be assured that no one can tamper with the content. And then they need to be assured that no one is listening to the interaction between them and your site. The web has this tremendous reach and lack of friction, but keeping users safe is absolutely paramount. And for this reason, HTTPS is mandatory for many of the APIs now on the web, including service worker, geolocation, camera access, WebRTC APIs, and so on. So once you've moved to a secure domain, three approaches to moving to a progressive web app. You can build from the ground up. You can start with a simple version, or you could focus on a single feature. So I want to have a quick look at these. So starting from the ground up makes sense when you're going through a redesign. If you're starting from scratch, well, you can build that appness right in from the start using service workers and so on. OLX is a great example of this. They launched their site for classified ads in India, providing communities with these great markets, and they've seen, fantastic improvement in time to interactive, drops in bounce rates, and so on. And they wanted to re-engage with their users, and including their mobile app users. And they've had fantastic results with that. And again, they built this right from scratch. But of course, not everyone can do this. Starting from scratch is not realistic. An example of a different approach is Air Berlin. They built this post-check-in app where you can get all the details for your flight. They weren't able to just start everything from scratch. Check out their stuff. They've done a beautiful job of this. And you can get your boarding pass, all those details, even when the app is then offline. Now, the final strategy is, just to define, is to pick on one particular strategy. Weather.com have done a great job with this, with notifications. I would really, really recommend, they've rolled this out in like 60 languages. If you're looking at UX for notifications, I would really recommend you look at what they've done. They've done a beautiful job of this within a PWA experience. And they've seen, great results from this, 1 million opt-ins within a month and so on. So check out their work. I'd thoroughly recommend that. I would look at these different approaches if you're thinking of building a progressive web app. Come along to Ava's talk about how to get started with moving from website to PWA later. It's an excellent talk, and she'll talk more about how you can get started with that stuff. So we're seeing great momentum, different verticals, with travel companies on the web. We've seen like publishers, partners like Forbes. Forbes has seen like double in user engagement since the launch of their PWA, which is fantastic. And in e-commerce sites as well. Fandango, Alibaba, Rakuten, and so on. They've all invested really successfully in progressive web apps. And also like newer services like ride-sharing companies. This is just a sample of some of the people who are actively working with PWAs and new web APIs. Check out their work. They've done beautiful work on building great sites. And they're just finding like ways to start down this path, investing in, the mobile web and getting down this path of building progressive web apps. So I think, progressive web apps for these companies, it's giving them, reach and capability, the ability to target new audiences and new markets, which is, incredibly exciting on the web. If you want to learn more about this, we have some great sessions coming up. Some good presentations today and tomorrow. We'll have, like I say, a lot of expert web Googlers on hand to answer your questions, solve your problems. I'd also strongly recommend the training sessions from Sarah Clark and her team. These are really, really good and really good people running those sessions. And if you want to find out more, please check out Web Fundamentals, like case studies, resources at developers.google.com/web. Most of all, please feel free to come and talk to us. Any of the Googlers, there's a bunch of web Googlers here. We're here to learn what you're doing on the web, what we can do to make the web better, and to help you, build better experiences for all your users. Thank you very much, and we'll see you around. Thank you.